the Acting Files. I'm Hetty and today I am interviewing my dad, Hetty Goldsmith, and my brother, Hetty Goldsmith. And we're going to be talking about method acting is a very controversial topic. It's very controversial because a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about it. We're going to be exploring famous method actors, live and recorded performances, as well as getting Eben and Dad's opinions on it. So, method acting. Method acting it originated from Stanislavski, who devised the method, the 7 steps of the method, and then Lee Strasberg was the one that adapted these steps into method acting. So he uses emotional recall, where actors take their own emotional experiences and use that for their performance. And this kind of psychological effect of where you're bringing up your own emotions is very controversial because it has negatively affected a lot of actors, but also I think personally it does often lead to a better performance. So I want to know if you guys know any actors that are method actors, if you have any stories that you know.
So, obviously, the most famous one is probably Heath Ledger in his role as the Joker. People regard that performance very highly, and he did do method acting. He locked himself away and didn't sleep in order to get into the psychotic role of the Joker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then he died, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He took it too far.
Yeah, and it's a good example of how that negatively affects. Do you have any?
Yeah, I guess conversely to that, you would have somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis, who's very famous for method acting and also clearly very successful.
Yeah.
Because he sort of does a film every couple of years, swipes a load of awards and then disappears off again. And he's famously employed a type of method acting which I think is quite commonly perceived as sort of what most people would think of as method acting, which is staying in the role, staying in character, off screen as well as on screen, obviously. And I know he did things like when he was filming Gangs of New York, he would only wear the proper costume correct to the period. Some of the other actors apparently were wearing modern fabrics underneath to keep them warm because it was very cold. Thermal stuff, but he insisted on only wearing what they would have worn at the time. And he also apparently went round Rome picking fights with random strangers to get into the role of, I think it was Butcher Bill, maybe. I think that's the character.
Maybe. I've not seen the film.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of actors modern day, but the most famous actor that sort of brought method acting to Hollywood was Marlon Brando, because he studied under Lee Strasberg, who taught his students about his method acting, and he was known to stay in character on set, and it sort of became sort of like a craze, almost like the new trend where people saw him doing it and they started doing it, and it's kind of just spiral. But like, I think more minuscule things like changing your appearance is very common. Like Natalie Portman doing learning ballet for Black Swan, that could be method acting, I suppose, technically. Even though it's something she had to do.
Yeah.
She's still like.
There's the boot camp thing, like Band of Brothers, where they all went to a boot camp.
Yeah.
So they could. That was partly so they'd be fit for the filming, I think, but also so they went through like the same training that the guys that they were playing.
Yeah.
From World War II would have been through. They had the same training, using the same equipment and stuff like that. So that would have really, I imagine that would have really helped them.
Yeah.
And then you got Brad Dourif shaving his eyebrows for Lord of the Rings.
Like little things,
It was his idea.
Yeah, and like I think staying in character is actually quite effective. I think it's so difficult. I mean, obviously you guys wouldn't particularly know, but it's very difficult to snap in and out of it. It's so difficult to do that. So I do think it's such a spectrum, and it gets such a bad name because, you know, it's more interesting for everyone to hear about, oh, you know, the extremes. But in fact, it probably gets such a bad rep because of those extremes rather than it as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of smaller things that are considered method.
Mm-hmm.
That again, like Brad Dourif in Lord of the Rings, he's
Yeah.
American, but he needed a kind of, not really a British accent, but a kind of anglicised, kind of mid-Atlantic kind of, not really an accent. And I guess it's probably a lot easier to maintain an accent if you're not going in and out of it.
Yeah.
So that might have been just he did that just from a practical point of view.
And then you get it where you can't stop doing the accent, like Austin Butler, whereas
where his voice is lower now, apparently.
now he can't get many jobs because
You can only play Elvis.
he's just Elvis now. Yeah, but also I think a lot of people just assume that screen acting is where method acting is, and I think that is a good point because screen acting is very like stop start. You know, like if you're doing a live performance, you're in it and you're in it and you're in it and then you're off, which is a huge positive of live performance over. But you can actually method act for live performance, like Laurence Olivier. I wouldn't say he's necessarily a method actor, but he does practice Stanislavski's method rather than Lee Strasberg. And for his live performances of Hamlet, he definitely used some of like the emotional recall and things like that, which you could say was method acting, even though it was a live performance. So I just want to know what you guys think are any like pros and cons of method acting.
Well, I think that method acting is especially good for roles where they're very extreme and like over exaggerated, usually quite evil roles, because it's an unnatural thing for people to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something that's like very against their morals.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think also it would be helpful if you want to convince an audience that you are a certain type of person. I mean, like a World War II paratrooper, or I don't know, a tailor, or you know, like in Gangs of New York, somebody living in that under brutal conditions.
Yeah.
But I guess the downsides would be, I don't know, maybe you can get to the emotional core of the character better other ways. Like, I think, say for example, if you were going to play a character that's homeless, you could sleep rough for a period of time, but you're always going to know that you're doing it as research for a role.
Yeah, exactly.
You know that you've got your house, your flat, your wherever to go back to, and you can just get up and
if
walk
you really
off,
need
call an Uber.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got that safety net, which is gonna be like a kind of psychological barrier. So I think maybe in that instance, actually talking to people that have had those experiences, either currently going through living like that, or have lived like that in the past, that might be better.
More effective.
Should be more traditional research, I guess, that you would then draw on in a more traditional acting style.
Yeah. There was a really interesting thing that I saw, where it's argued a lot in like the industry that method acting is only accessible to typically rich, straight, white men and a lot of people argue that, I can't remember who said it, someone said in an interview that, you know, like you said about Daniel Day-Lewis going around picking fights, they were saying, oh, a black man couldn't do that. So I want to know if you guys think that method acting is something that comes from a privileged actor, and whether you think that it's accessible to everyone.
I think there's some truth in that. I don't think it's necessarily to do with who you are as a person, as in what type of person you are. I think if you're an actor at the level of Daniel Day-Lewis, you're going to have the time and the resources. If they're hiring Daniel Day-Lewis for a job, they're expecting him to bring his A game, which includes the way he would prepare for a role, which might include going off and learning to be a tailor, or walking around Rome picking fights with people.
Yeah.
And they'd have to step in and go, no, don't worry, it's Daniel Day-Lewis, he's only joking. And I agree with the idea that is only accessible to some people, but I would say it's probably only accessible to, if it is only accessible to certain people, it's only accessible to people at the very top of their game.
Yes.
So I think Samuel L. Jackson would be able to do that just as well as Daniel Day-Lewis. So
Yeah.
I'd argue it's more to do with who they are and what's
Their level.
the kind of roles that they get offered, and their level. But you do need to have the time and resources to take months and months
Because
not working.
I know Adrian Brody, he literally, I don't remember what film it was for. It might have been the Piano Man.
Pianist.
The Pianist, yeah. He got rid of
Billy
like
Joel, Piano Man. Go on.
he got rid of all his belongings and literally dropped off the face of the earth. And not a lot of people would be able, people with families, people with responsibilities.
Yes.
Like, so I do think that you can. It is limited.
Yeah, like.
And also, people on set won't put up with you if you're a new actor and you're like, oh no, you know what I mean? If you're pretentious.
I think you have to
about
kind of
it.
prove yourself, I guess.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's
people
true
need
of
to give you the
any
benefit
job
of the doubt.
really. You
with it.
can't just walk in day one.
Yes.
Hey, up on Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, well, maybe in a few years.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any thoughts on how method acting is not accessible to, people of colour, or, women, or people are less fortunate?
I do think that it mainly boils down to the responsibilities that a person has.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, let's say, if you got kids, for example, you wouldn't be able to just leave for a few months.
Yes, yeah.
But I think it's mainly just about the responsibilities, and also the resources that person has. Because if you're a poorer person, then you obviously won't be able to it'll ruin your life if you just don't do anything for months.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I agree with you. So I think the biggest question overall is, do you think that method acting on a whole is effective and worth it? Obviously, to say that, like, in cases like Heath Ledger, who died, it's so difficult to be like, the performance, it's not your place to say, and, I think in those cases it's definitely not worth that performance's life. But like in less extreme cases, or as just like in general, do you think method acting is like worth it?
I think it depends on the results. There are method actors or actors that have used method acting for a role and it hasn't yielded the results they wanted, whether that be critical acclaim or awards, or just nailing a really good performance. So I think in some examples it does, but then you also have some famous actors who are famously not method, like Anthony Hopkins, who is famously incredible. I don't understand what it means. I don't know why they do it. He's not like he's not critical of any individuals, but he's always been kind of a bit critical of like he doesn't really get it, and he's quite open about that. And I don't think anybody could argue that he doesn't get results.
No, not at all. I think that I don't want to say that method acting is used by people who can't flip it on and off like that, but I can't do that. Like, it takes me a while. I could not like for Hamlet, for example. if I do my insane monologue, I could not just be normal and go like, and say like, the teacher goes, oh yeah, go. I wouldn't be able to just go and snap into it. I'd have to work myself into it, which I suppose you could take that as a form of method acting. But I think that it takes a huge skill to do method acting, but it takes another skill to be able to just switch it on and off like that. And I think it's very interesting, people that can do that.
I think if you got two complete beginners and you took one of them down a method route and the other one not at all, you might get slightly, if they were sort of judged to be on an equal footing from the start, if that's even possible, you could potentially get a slightly better, more believable, more realistic performance out of the one you took down the method route, rather than the other one. But I think that doesn't mean it's better. It just means to me it's just a different way of doing it. And I think it's probably, I imagine, I don't know obviously, but I imagine the top actors out there use elements of both.
Yes.
They might use method for the more practical elements when they need, like I said, when they need a particular skill. They need to convince, like you can't pretend to ride a horse.
Yeah.
You either can ride a horse or you
exactly,
can't. I know Willem Dafoe famously told a director he could ride a motorbike when he couldn't, and then had to basically learn on set without the director noticing.
Yeah. Sounds
Not
like
advisable, but he pulled it off. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's very hard to say which is better, but I guess it just depends on the actor and the role.
I also think when I watch, especially live performances, that's where it's clear, is you can tell whether or not an actor acts for them or for an audience. I think a huge defining factor between people's styles is whether it's performative or it's for themselves. And I think method acting is used more by I'm not trying to say that either one is better, or they're just different. I wouldn't compare them. I think method acting is used more by actors who do it because they want to feel it. And I think people that don't understand method acting do it because they're trying to communicate something to an audience, or they're trying to do something with their performance rather than just do their performance. And I also think, I feel like everyone uses method acting in some way, especially when you're using like your emotional recall and your own experiences, because in order to play a part, I think you need to relate to that character and understand them. Whether that just be understanding them as a person and you as a person, and they're two separate entities, or whether you want to cross that over, you still need to have drawn on your own experiences or something to understand. Like, for example, if you were playing a character who's lost a family member, you would naturally emulate the feelings that you would have had if you had lost a family member. And it would be a subconscious thing, you know what I mean? So I think that method acting is used subconsciously regardless, and I think that I don't even like the term method acting, because it just gives it such a bad name, and I think it is all just acting in extreme forms of acting. But do you think that like the emotional intensity that these actors need to put themselves through for method acting is sustainable? I
don't think it is very sustainable, because I feel like sometimes the effect that it puts on the actor can sometimes still last.
Yeah.
And like you said.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, but I think surely just by the fact that acting is an art, you need to be very open to looking at different ways of doing it.
Both of you. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast.